Hi, welcome to Under the Dome. We're here today on Town Meeting Television with two representatives from our Chittenden County District, Representative Chloe Tomlinson and Representative Emily Krasnow. Welcome. Thank you both for joining us. We're going to hear a little bit about what you're doing in Montpelier. You're a representative broadly from Winooski. Any parts of Burlington too?
Nope.
Winooski?
Chittenden 21 is the boundaries of Winooski.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Emily, you're South Burlington.
Yep,
Right?
Chittenden 9, so 1/5 of South Burlington.
Yeah,
I
and there
have.
are five other.
Four others.
Four others.
Yep.
Five of you. Great. And tell me a little bit. What are your committees that you're sitting on in your first term in the legislature, Rep. Tomlinson? Yes.
Yeah, so I've started my first term this year, and I'm serving on the House Transportation Committee. So we're dealing with everything related to ground and air transportation, rail transportation in the state, that infrastructure, and also working on addressing any climate change emissions related to the transportation sector and working on mitigating those.
Great. And Rep. Krasnow?
Yeah.
your committee?
Well, you can't talk about transportation without talking about housing. So this is my second term on the General and Housing Committee, and this year I'm ranking member, which has been a nice adjustment to a new.
Explain that to those of us
Sure.
who don't understand.
So on committees, we have a chair, a vice chair, and a ranking member. So my role is I do a lot of planning, our agendas with our chair. I help other committee members kind of make sure things are going well, just checking in with people, and then obviously can take over if the vice chair and chair are not there. But it's been an exciting role, and I'm digging it.
Okay. And both of these committees are policy committees, right? They're not money committees. You're not making decisions on how much or what to spend unless it goes to appropriations. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, transportation is one of the small money committees.
Okay.
Appropriations, of course, is the main money committee working on the budget and the big bill. But the transportation committee does allocate the funds for the transportation bill, the T-bill. So we're working with the budget that the Agency of Transportation proposes and then kind of working through the detail of that. And then Corrections and Institutions also has their budget as well.
So tell us what's been happening in the Transportation Committee. And you had to get up to speed, right? Because it's your first year.
Yes,
And
a
what was
lot
that?
of learning, yes. And on our committee, there are 5 new members. So for all of us, it's been a learning experience. And our chair is new as well, although he was on the committee for the past 2 terms. So he has that background. So a lot of, or really the only focus of the Transportation Committee in the first half of the session is working on the transportation bill, which we call the T-bill, which is the entire transportation program for the state. So it's the budget, it's how much are we spending on all the different projects across the state in terms of road infrastructure, rail, our airports. It's also what we're spending on public transit, which has been a big area of focus for me. And then there are some other kind of studies that we can do through the transportation bill and different policy initiatives. So we were looking at kind of report backs from past studies that have been done related to transportation sector. One that we heard a report back from was the Cap and Invest study. So looking at how we might implement or join a cap and invest program for our transportation sector greenhouse gas emissions, similar to a cap and invest program that we're a part of for our electricity sector.
Explain that a little bit more. What's a cap and invest?
So cap and invest program is intended to help meet greenhouse gas emission targets, decrease targets, and it works at sort of capping the amount of total emissions and then creating kind of a credit exchange for folks who are going to be emitting higher than what their target is. And it actually generates revenue as well, which can then be reinvested in climate change mitigation efforts, or for example, in the transportation sector, where we're really needing funds to help, for example, towns to deal with the impact of flooding, or some of the incentives that we've seen for transitioning for folks transitioning to electricity, like heat pumps, like those kind of things we can invest in those types of programs through funds that we would have generated. Unfortunately, though, the report didn't come back very favorable, and we're not really in a position at this point where we can join a cap and invest initiative. However, New York is in the process of developing their own, and that might be an opportunity for us in the future.
Great. So we'll come back to you and talk about other things that haven't made it through. Let's hear about some things that have made it through. What's going on in your committee with the general housing?
Yeah, so I just want to state, so General and Housing Committee has housing, but not land use policy. And we also don't do the hotel motel program and emergency shelter. But then we also have labor in our portfolio and social justice. So it's really a dream portfolio for me and the committee I really wanted to be on because it combines a lot of the things I'm passionate about and have worked in. So this year, again, we had some new folks, and we have a new chair. And so, Chair Mahali was on appropriations before, so it's kind of new to a policy committee, which, as we talked about, can be very different. So we all kind of got everyone up to speed, and we spent the first bit just having folks in, reacclimating to our portfolio, talking about, hearing from builders, homeowners, landlords, tenants, everything housing, developers, hearing about what changes have happened since we were there last term, bringing us up to speed. And then, our labor portfolio, we're hearing a lot. We have a constitutional amendment that is in our committee now, Prop 3, about the right to organize. And so we're going to we started with housing, and now we're kind of going into labor. And then we also have received the Senate's omnibus housing bill. We passed our H479, our omnibus housing bill out recently. It passed out on a very strong vote, and then it went to the House floor and had tripartisan support. Very proud of that bill. Really took the time throughout the first half of the session to hear from stakeholders. I spent the summer and fall kind of on tour all over Vermont, listening to where we could pick up off the Home Act and Act 181. Oftentimes when we pass legislation, sometimes it takes time to see how things pan out, where we can do better. And so that was kind of my goal, was to figure that out and be ready to hit the ground running with ideas. And so now our bill is in the Senate, and we just got their housing bill, so we kind of swapped. And what I was really impressed with this year was how similar they were, which is not always the case because we're very siloed with the Senate sometimes. And so really seeing the overlap, and there's a large piece of in their bill that's not in ours, because so our housing committee doesn't have the economic development piece. And I know you talked to Rep. Duke recently about infrastructure. So that is in the Senate's bill. So we're really hoping to combine those two, because I think that the infrastructure piece is critical to add to our bill. So I'm excited to kind of blend them together. And then now we're kind of diving into labor, and we're going to be working on Prop 3 and an omnibus labor bill that's coming over from the Senate. There was a lot of legislation that I introduced that was in that already, so I don't have to push to add those things. So I've been really pleased with the work that we're getting from the Senate and what we've passed out of our committee.
Tell me, what does it mean when you say omnibus?
Yeah, sure. So in the legislature, there are different types of bills. So often folks will introduce a single bill with one number, and from a sponsor with co-sponsors. And then sometimes committees or even legislators do a bill that kind of encompasses a lot of different things. So we decided this session to do an omnibus housing bill. So it had all the components of different ideas and bills that were...
So give us what's the big picture? What are the big things that we are expecting to see come throughout that bill?
Yeah, so earlier we were talking about investments. So for me, housing is really a yes and situation. And so to meet our housing crisis, I believe that we need to both work on land use policy and regulation, which isn't in our jurisdiction, but the other piece, which is the investments that go into housing. So our committee makes recommendations to appropriations, so things like money for VHIP, which helps, landlords and dilapidated buildings put things online. Often when I drive around or in places, I say, "Oh, that could
That's
be
Vermont Housing Investment Program.
improvement."
Improvement program.
So I look around and I see, we had in South Burlington, we had the Pizza Hut that many folks know about for a long time. Things like that, you really think all over the state there's. And this program has been extremely successful. And so things like that, we have.
So now I provide incentives to builders to take a site that
Right.
needs to be turned over rather than just a
to
clean
get it
site.
online.
Yeah.
Yep. So, often in Burlington, this area, I'll go over to a friend's house and be like, why is that an empty building? Right. And a lot of it too is outreach. So the development that can go into that is important, but also so investments for VHIP, we have Vermont Housing Conservation Board, VHCB, the money that we make the recommendations of the money that they would need to get for affordable housing, because
Like down payments for first-time home buyers.
so we have
or,
missing middle,
Yeah.
down payments for first-time home buyers, all sorts of different programs. But what our committee does is reflect and look at the data to see what programs are doing well, where we need to improve. And so we really worked hard to make sure in an all-encompassing bill, and it passed out of our committee 11-1. So we have 11 members now, 10-1. And we're really proud of that. And so it hit the House floor, and it has a wide range of things in it. I'm happy to dive deeper into that later on, but really proud of it. And I did just want to touch on one other thing. One of the things that I'm really proud of that I worked on last year was setting up housing goals and targets. So part of Act 181 was a piece that I pushed through where it had the administration tasked with coming up with housing goals and targets. Because as a policymaker on that committee, I felt like we can have, anecdotes all we want about the housing crisis. I know it's real, and many of us do, but in order to show our colleagues how serious we need to be about a real public health emergency, was putting it into data. So now the administration has a dashboard that folks can go to on their website and see in each community. It's really broken down tight with regional planning commissions to see the goals and targets we need.
Is this something that the public can
It's right on the website.
This is on the
On DHCD's website.
DHC, Department of Housing and
Community Development.
Community Development, thank you.
Yep. And so folks can go see what the housing data shows in their area of the state. And anyway, so it was something that was really important that we saw those numbers at the beginning of the session, and it's really helped guide our policy.
Great, thanks. We're talking about the revenue. Talk a little bit about, so when you're doing this transportation bill, are you looking at the revenue side of that as well? And what are those revenue pieces for transportation?
That's a great question. That's been a central part of our conversations. So far this session will be an ongoing conversation because our transportation revenue largely comes from the gas tax, diesel tax, motor vehicle purchase and use tax. And the challenge has been in Vermont and also nationally, we're seeing a decrease in revenue from the gas and diesel tax as...
Number on that, is there a percentage of what that?
So it's been, I don't have the exact numbers, but it had stagnated and now has been sort of going down. Is it?
2%
I don't want
or
to,
something?
single digits, very low single digits decrease, but that has sort of led to a situation where our overall transportation fund is only increasing around 1 to 2% annually, and costs are increasing much more quickly than that. And so that's creating a really challenging situation for our transportation fund and our transportation program overall. And so we've been having conversations around what can we do to recoup some of that revenue. And so one of the key tools that kind of came front and center after doing an evaluation of different options for additional revenue sources was a mileage-based user fee. Which the acronym is MBUF. And essentially what it aims to do is ask folks to pay a fee per the miles driven in a given year, which is meant to be an equivalent essentially to the gas, what someone would pay in the gas tax.
Regardless of what kind of vehicle they're driving, you'd still collect a gas tax, I assume, and then add this mileage-based user fee?
Well, so just to step back for a second, I guess I neglected to make sure the context was clear that the reason the gas tax is decreasing is because fuel economy or fuel efficiency is improving with hybrid cars. We have more EVs on the road, which is great. That's a part of our goals. We're reaching our climate targets, and yet it means that people aren't, paying that tax at the pump. And so this, the MBUF that we're looking at would be just for EV drivers and intended to recoup that lost gas tax that EV drivers aren't currently paying.
And not to get too much in the weeds, but you'd collect that data, say, at the state inspection.
Yes, because
there's rumors that the state inspection is...
I'd be skeptical about those rumors. Yeah, I mean, because we have an annual inspection, it enables us it gives us the infrastructure to be able to implement something like an
so
MBUF.
Who are you hearing from, and I would ask this of both of you, who are you hearing from when you see a bill like that come through? Who's at the table? I mean, you have these little committee rooms that you meet in. People can go in, anybody can go in and sit and listen to those committees, or even maybe request the ability to make testimony. Who are you hearing from, and who aren't you hearing from in those committee rooms? Yeah,
such a great question. Well, we certainly spend a lot of time with the Agency of Transportation and various folks within the agency, including the DMV. We also have, in terms of agencies in our government, we hear from the Agency of Natural Resources as well, ANR. We've heard from organizations that are advocates for bike and ped infrastructure, for climate resiliency work, who represent contractors and builders in our states. That's a very important group for when we're thinking about building, working on roads and paving. We've heard from the Automotive Dealers Association. I'm forgetting the exact term.
Fuel Dealers Association.
No, not the fuel dealer. Yeah, the
we can come.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, who represent automotive dealers, basically, from the Truckers Association. So different groups. We have occasionally had visitors in our committee room who will share from their own experiences. We had a group of students who we were talking to about school busing and sort of thinking about if there are any efficiencies that could be gained from aligning school busing with public transit in certain ways. So we've had some of those ad hoc kind of side conversations, but in terms of voices we aren't hearing, one group I've thought about a lot this session has been folks who make use of public transit. And we've heard from public transit providers, but not as much so from the folks who are really reliant on public transit. And I think that's an important voice as we're seeing revenue decreasing, our budget decreasing, and we're decreasing our public transit budget, what that felt impact is on the ground. So those
we don't have a public transit riders union.
Right. No.
We have a tenants union, but yeah.
Yeah.
And speaking of tenants union, you're in the general housing, you're on the landlord tenant study committee. What are you working on in that committee?
Yeah, so this was actually a really, really exciting thing for me. So last fall, so study committees often are tasked with, as you know, we're a citizen legislature, so we don't always have the time or capacity to spend time on something that's really focused on an issue. And so I was appointed to, over the summer and fall, to work, and I chaired the Landlord-Tenant Study Committee. And so it was made up of 2 members of the House from different parties and 2 of the Senate from different parties. And, you know, they chose me as chair. I was a little nervous, but no better time than now to dive right in. It's a topic that I've worked on for many years in my own life before the legislature, so I was excited to get to work on that. So we had stakeholders from the community. We had the Landlord Association, we had CVOEO, we had different folks from the judiciary that talk about eviction. So it was a really great group. We had a tenant advocate. It was a great group of folks, and we met 6 times over the fall. And it was really important to me as I set the agenda to make sure that we had time for public comment. So we had a long amount of time each start of the meetings for public comment so that folks could talk about their experiences both as tenants and landlords. And really, I didn't really want to see it as sides. I really wanted to just work together it's clear to me and many colleagues and the folks on the committee that we need to act on this. But there's legislation that for both landlords and tenants that could really be helpful. So the committee came up with a report, and I've kind of gone into committees in the Senate, into the House, and really explained the report, explained our process. Some people were frustrated that we didn't, come with a recommendation, like here's what we need to do. But what I felt was that in 6 meetings with that many people, legislators and citizens, is very difficult. So instead, put forward a plan for policymakers in the building to have, to look at the report and decide what they thought from using the report would be helpful, and have it all really teed up for them.
So what are some, go ahead.
Yeah, so with witness recommendations, so, just cause eviction is something that we've talked about in this, in Burlington and Winooski and other places. I've been involved in organizing around that issue previously, so it's something that I really knew about. But how would it work to have just cause eviction across the state? How would it work?
And Winooski passed just cause eviction.
Yep, and
it
For
has
the
to
second
go
time.
to
Right.
the legislature. And is that likely to get back? Is the legislature likely to say yes or no, or what's?
So there's 4 just cause eviction charter changes sitting in government operations committee that neither of us are on.
Yeah.
I'm a little skeptical about how likely they are to move individually. And what also we've heard in the past is that there's more of an interest in a statewide policy, as Rep. Krasow was referencing. Yeah. I think there's also other models too. I think New York has an opt-in model where municipalities can opt in, which I think could be an interesting option, given that more than 80,000 Vermonters now live in towns or cities that have voted for this charter change. So I'm not sure how likely it is for the individual charter change to move, but I certainly have clearly heard the call and feel strongly myself it's something we need to find a way to advance in one way or another.
And that's what you're saying is.
Yeah, so right now, part of that report was more information that's most up to date about how it would work statewide. Also, rental registry is something that we worked really hard on in our committee last year. I'm very disappointed. That's a policy area that has been stifled for a long time now, and it's something that I felt was really important. Unfortunately, given the makeup of the legislature, we did not have the support in our committee to have that this year, but we'll keep trying. But yeah, that's another policy recommendation or some guidance around that came out of the report. And then there's also things for landlords that are helpful too. What's it look like when you have folks who are in your buildings dealing substances, and there's neighbors or seniors or children? How do you, we're finding, just like with other public safety issues, the backlog of how long it takes for eviction, and how we can help people with money to support them tenants who need representation. And so we also had national experts come in from around the country to talk about what other states were doing. It was really just an informative, wonderful experience. So where are we now with this, right? So last week I went and talked to the Senate Committee on Housing and Economic Development, and gave the presentation of the report again. And Chair Clarkson was like, okay, well, we need to act. And I was like, I agree. So what do we do now? So now, moving forward, in January, we are going to make sure that both committees have the capacity to take on this issue. There are vehicles in both our committees. Rep. Tomlinson has one of the bills, and then Senator Vyhovsky in the Senate. So there are vehicles. Will they look exactly like as introduced? Probably not, but they are vehicles ready to go in the committees. And so we are, actively in discussions. I think it's something that the House and Senate need to collaborate on to make sure we're on the same page to get some of these things. But it is a crisis for both tenants and landlords, and we need to take action on that as soon as possible. This session has been eaten up with a lot from, I think Vermonters asked us to really tighten in what we're going to focus on in the bucket. So we have Ed Finance has been hitting every committee, and our housing crisis and affordability, and so everything was it was a very different session this year. And so many folks might be surprised about how few bills were passed through each committee, whereas in other bienniums there was more bills passed. But right now
Do we know how many bills have been passed?
I don't know.
And then,
but a lot of people are
many
like,
are
where
left
are the
on the wall?
bills?
Yeah.
They're like, where are the bills? Why aren't they passing? Yeah, there's a lot on the wall. I don't know about in your committee. We're kind of working through introductions of some of the stuff on the wall, and then planning for, it goes so fast.
Yep.
So we're kind of looking at things now of what we can kind of start to pick up in January again.
Great.
I don't know if that's kind of what you guys have been.
Yeah, we're definitely hoping to, or my sense is we'll be using a lot of the second half of the session to start hearing testimony or considering things that we'll be focusing on next session.
So beyond this, like looking at what's coming up for the next session, it's the end of April now, almost, right? And you're hoping to get out of there by May.
Yeah.
But likely going to stay longer because there's still some conversations about the budget. What are the things what are you looking forward to in this next 2 months? What are you going to have to be struggling through in the next 2 months before the governor lets you go in June? And the big question is that everybody has is like, what's the effect of federal funding cuts?
Yeah, I would love to take some time to talk about that piece as well.
Yeah.
A lot of big questions there.
Yeah.
I could talk about the federal funding
Yeah, please.
cuts.
Yeah, let's
and I
talk
have
about it.
one thing to flag in the DMV bill, which is the bill we're focusing on the second half of the session in the Transportation Committee. But in terms of federal funding, we've been spending a good amount of time in our committee tracking this issue to the degree that we can, although it's been quite the roller coaster ride, as everyone knows.
And people may not know, but literally things are getting cut. Like I saw on March 38th, the ESSER funds were cut. And so schools are all of a sudden facing expectations.
A third of our state budget is federal funding.
Yeah, and it's all just sort of piecemeal. It's not like anybody's saying to Vermont, like, hey, let us give you a heads up.
No heads up.
No heads
Yeah,
up.
and
So-
it's a moving target too. There have been ups and downs. Actually, the last update we had was more of an up, like a little bit more positive in the scheme of things. But I mean, I think for transportation, it's a huge concern because more than 50% of our budget for transportation is federal funds. I mean, it's a huge portion
all those
of our
projects that we see.
Yes, the
going
huge
on
bridge
right now, Main
projects.
Street,
Yeah, all that. Most of those are 80% federal
Yeah.
fund. I mean, the formula funds are really significant in our ability to maintain and build infrastructure
I mean,
here.
is that something where we could see Main Street just
I don't think so. Yeah, those kind of funds appear safe for projects that are projected in 2027, and we haven't. I've been asking consistently, and the folks in AOT have been saying we're not hearing of any specific changes to formula funds, which would be a really big impact and a big concern. Although, of course, we've seen in executive orders directives to tie transportation funding to birth rates in states. So we don't know what's coming down the pike. And I think the conversation is so big and daunting, we haven't really quite gone there yet. We've been dealing with what's in front of us for the time being.
But your committee's paying attention.
Yeah, our committee's paying attention. And I think the biggest challenge we've seen, luckily it seems like our funding for most of those projects is safe, but in terms of some of the more particular like policy, especially like EV, support for your EV infrastructure, that's been where we've been hit hardest. And the NEVI program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, we had great plans for a network of high-speed chargers across the state. That funding was just pulled out after we had already sort of set up plans to build those sites. Only one of them was built, and I think we're having to go back to the drawing board on the others. But so yeah, we've been trying to track that and follow, consider if there are ways we can fill gaps where they emerge. But it's something that will have to be a continued area of discussion for transportation.
Well, housing is, we have our HUD vouchers that, earlier in the session, we would talk to constituents who are really worried about, losing their vouchers or not having more vouchers. And
these are folks who are in permanent housing, who need to pay their rent, who needs assistance to pay their rent.
And a lot of the housing assistance comes from the federal government. And so we've really been paying attention to that. Our speaker and our governor and our treasurer and our attorney general have really set up like task force to really be on top of and aware of what's coming down. But also our municipal governments have had to really, live in fear. And I also, while we take a moment to talk about what that's been like, just this session, regardless of what the work that we're doing, there is just this tremendous, uneasy, scary, sick feeling for myself and many in the building about every day feels like just another terrifying news. People who are our friends and community members are facing just tremendous fear about their, from their identity, who they love, who they are. People in our community are being, taken on the street. I mean, it's just so it's hard to focus on what's here when every day there's another terrifying thing that we're seeing or reading, and it's not just a what if. It's here now. And so for me, that occupies 90% of my brain, even in the building. And I texted my brother today, and I was just like, there's nothing we can do. And people often are like, do something, please. And I feel as, a person in state government that there are programs, it is worse than 2016 now. There are amazing things that we did put in place, but there are some things that we just can't control. And that's how it feels right now. Yeah. It just feels like a spiral. And so people's housing, people's rights. So I think as far as our committees that we're on, I know, for myself and I know Chloe, like that takes a tremendous amount of space in our heads of worrying about community members and how we can support them. We had a town hall with Treasurer Pichek and Senator Welch in South Burlington, and the room was filled with people, and they were just, in tears, asking Senator Welch, like, please help us. And there, he's doing. We have the best delegation, in my opinion, that you could have, with Bernie and Becca and Peter. But there's only so much, and it's so hard for them too. So I just want to kind of ground us in that reality too of why this session has been tremendously difficult, not just on a funding level, but on a human level. It's been really, really hard.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned earlier that is happening is Prop 3.
Yes.
And that is in some way to protect Vermont from, there was a federal executive order signed to limit the right of unions to organize and bargain. So tell us a little bit about what Prop 3 is, where this come from, and how do folks pay attention to this? Are we likely to see this as
So it passed out this, so how a constitutional amendment works is it has to pass through 2 legislative bodies, similar to Prop 5, our Reproductive Liberty Amendment.
which was another thing that was put in place in advance
Correct.
of.
So this is another protection. So it passed the Senate 29-1, which is a huge, great vote. And so now it's in our committee. So what we're doing now is kind of reviewing it. You can't make any changes. The language stays the same.
And just give us the language. What does it do? Yeah.
So Prop 3 is basically, as you mentioned, committing to be able to have the right to organize. And labor is under attack federally, here, in other states. And so for me, I am a former union steward and the daughter of 2 union members. And so in addition to housing labor, I was always really excited to have this as part of the portfolio that I would work on. And I'm also the co-chair of the Working Vermonters Caucus, which is the labor caucus. And so unions all over the state are supporting this because we need better protections to make sure that people have the right to organize in a time of massive income inequality and rights being under attack all over the country. Vermont wants to make sure that people here know that they have the right to collectively organize for better wages and working conditions. And so the next step is our committee this week is taking testimony on it, and then we're going to have part of the process is a public hearing. So we're going to have a public hearing in a couple weeks and hear from people all over the state who are really passionate.
And anybody can sign up and be part of the public hearing.
Yeah, you got 3 minutes. I was on the committee last year, so we had it then. But this is a priority for me and many of my colleagues, and I'm looking forward to seeing it through. But then the fun part,
and just so folks know, we will be tracking Prop 3 through the legislature and probably recording those public hearings and sharing them with you as well. So you can
and they'll be on the legislative website.
They'll be on the legislative website, but we'll also hold them here as well.
But the fun part will be this summer and fall, I'm planning to go across the state kind of talking about it because it's going to be on the ballot. So we have to really educate people about what this means, what it is, the importance. So I plan
to pass through 2 bodies and then
be voted on by the Vermont voters. And maybe we'll do a show on it or something at some point before the election. But so we'll share. For those running again, we'll share the ballot with that Prop 3, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah. So we're getting close to time. I mean, you all are friends. You know each other before you became legislators.
Yes, we are friends in real life.
And you are from different parties, progressive. Well, are you a P/D?
P/D, yes.
And then you're a Democrat. Are you D/P? Or are you
No, I'm just a Democrat. But I really, when people ask me, they say, "Are you a Democrat or you a Republican?" I say, "I'm Emily," because I think that we're all just there to do what's best for Vermont. We're big tents, and when I walk through the building, I don't see party label. I see a person, and I think we all work across the aisle really well together to do what's best for our community. That's why we're there. So, but yes.
And that was my next question, was just like, what's your experience been? Is this feeling like a productive use of your time to meet your, both your constituents' needs and also your own values? Tell us a little bit about how's it been.
Yeah, well, it's been an enormous learning experience, certainly. And as Emily was pointing out earlier, it's I don't have context for past sessions, but it feels like a pretty unique moment to be in this kind of role that's carrying the responsibility of working on legislation relevant here in Vermont to my constituents, tracking what's happening on the federal level and attending to that as well, and learning what it means to be a legislator and how to navigate the processes, not only technically, but also, in terms of how things work, not informally as well. So been doing a lot of learning and also trying to make sure I'm pushing on key areas that I know are really important to Winooski, that are a number of the reasons that I got into the legislature. So I've been proud to be able to advocate strongly on public transit and resourcing for public transit, and on tenant protections. I was just in the General and Housing Committee last week presenting on tenant rights omnibus bill that I was proud to sponsor. And so I feel like I've been able to strike that balance, but it's certainly a lot of different pieces at once, and trying to navigate how to move things forward while also attending to the relationship building and learning element that's really essential to a first term.
Great.
And I just want to highlight something real quick. I think it's really important, and I'm so excited to share this time with Chloe, because too often, some folks that are serving are older, retired, independently wealthy. And here, we have someone who's stepped up, who's like myself, in a younger generation, because we need more people with lived experience who are living today's issues.
And you have to take time off of your regular day job.
Right.
And sort of negotiate that to be here and get that other work done as well, right? Yeah.
Right, and that's a huge thing. And so this is public service. We're not in it for the money or the glory, right? And so for people in our generation and women to step up and step into these roles is so important in the building. And when you look out and see the representation, it's striking. And so I'm really grateful that Chloe has joined our body, because we just really need more people who are living today's challenges to be the people at the table. So I'm excited to share this, time with her, and also for people like that to join the body. And I hope that more people are able to, but it's not easy.
Thanks, Emily. And I'm so grateful to serve with you and for your mentorship.
Well, thank you both for joining us. And if folks want to learn more, you can go to VT Legislature. I can't remember what it's called. VT
Something like
Vermont.gov.
Yeah.
And look up these great folks. You can contact them using their email addresses on there and learn more about what's going on. And thank you for tuning in here at CCTV, Town Meeting TV. We appreciate that. We'll bring you this program as part of Under the Dome and many others like it. We'll be speaking with all of our legislative reps over the next couple of weeks into June, when we expect the legislature to adjourn. Thank you all for watching.